Hello, everyone. Buenos días todavía here. Happy Monday. It's a new day, it's a new week. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas to the Regalo Flores. I'm your host, Caroline Flores, and this is a space to share real stories, honest conversations, and the wisdom that we get along when we connect with ourselves. So there's a little bit of background noise. I apologize in advance because everyone's doing yard work, so I can hear it and it's distracting. It's also a Monday, but here we are. So, how are you doing? How has your weekend, or how was your weekend? How have you been feeling? I always like to ask that just for, not because I do want to know, but I also like for people to check in with themselves because I think it's interesting how sometimes we don't check within ourselves of how are we feeling, how are we doing, more so on just on other people and how they are and stuff like that. So this episode is called How Do I Hear Myself Again? Last week I talked about how I have lost myself in the past, how I didn't know who I was outside of the roles of always constantly taking care of people. And today it's just more of like a follow through of like how did I start hearing myself? What did that look like? What did that seem? Basically, what did that look like? Before we begin, I also just want to gently remind people that this podcast is a space for reflection, education, and inspiration. While I do draw from my experiences as a therapist, as a coach, as a human being navigating this journey alongside with you, this podcast is not replacement for therapy or mental health treatments. My hope is that these conversations offer you a moment to pause, reflect, and reconnect with yourselves. And hopefully, you get some good insight from sharing my stories along the way. So, here we go. I'm a little sleepy today, guys, so hopefully I can shake this off. All right. So, have you ever wondered what does it mean to hear myself again, or how do I hear myself again? Maybe you spent years trying to be the person that everybody needs you to be. I think we constantly see this in parenting and family values and being the reliable one, like the business people, the leaders in work spaces, all of that stuff. The helper, the one that's always constantly showing up, the one that's always figuring it out. And so then maybe along the way, we just kind of got really good at listening at everyone else and even what everyone else is needing or what everyone else was best for them, that we start to really stop listening to ourselves. We stop asking things like, what do I need? What do I want? What feels true to me? Um, and throughout these experiences, we do kind of have like a disconnection for ourselves or even for our voice. It doesn't mean that we're completely fully lost, but sometimes it feels like we can be lost. But it's just more of like we are disconnected with our voice. And that's what I really want to talk a little bit more about, that of like how do we return back to our voice? Like, have you ever noticed, maybe this is something that you do, or maybe you've noticed that, like, how often are we looking or seeking reassurance from others? And maybe we don't fully think that we're doing it very direct or subtle, but it's like little things of like, well, what do you think, or what do you think I should do? um, or when people are always constantly telling us like, well, you should do that, and you should do this, and you should do that. Those are the voices that constantly get kind of like blurred in our minds and our beings and stuff, that we start to slowly confuse those voices with other our voices in itself. um that's just a little example of it. So what did it look like for to be the voice of the people pleaser? um I don't think that I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to be a people pleaser. I think that it just slowly happened over time, um, through experiences, through expectations. I think I shared a little bit of this last week, through learning what people were proud of me, what people were depending on me, and what was valuable. Um, I really started to kind of like blur the lines of taking care of this person or taking care of what I for others really makes me feel good about myself. I've even said before in the past that I've said it in different things of like, I I would say a lot of like I know how to love people because I know what it's like to not feel loved. And so then that would used to be kind of like a theme that I used to live by. I was like, I'm always gonna make sure that everyone else is taken care of and loved and everything, make sure that they feel great because I know what that's like to not have that or to not have that love and support in return. So it was constantly like external validation or just looking for that external form of love to make me feel that I was good, that I was good enough at that, right? So then those qualities, like again, like they become really beautiful because again, like I'm a very giving and loving person, and I don't ever want that part to go away. I would always say that too, of like I don't want to change that because I don't want to be like everybody else. I don't want to be cold hearted. I don't want to be, like stuck up. I don't want to be all of that stuff. But it was taking advantage of me because I was always giving, 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 overextending, overextending, overextending. Um, Somewhere along the way that became confusing because that's how again I identified that I'm worthy. If these people or this place or whatever, if I can show my value to them, they'll see how important and valuable I am in return. I used to do that a lot in relationships as a lover girl. I can't wait to have an episode of the lover girl because that's going to be interesting. But again, like I would always be the giver and the lover and the, everything, but that also came at a cost because when I was putting myself overextending myself or being the people pleaser in my partnerships or in my relationships, not even just romantic, but in all types of relationships, there was always that hidden, unspoken expectation that they're going to also show back the love that I want and receive desperately. And again, in those moments, I didn't know. It took me some time and just like experiences and learning about myself and learning how to love myself, how much that was just kind of me doing that to myself because I was putting it out an outspoken expectation or unmet expectation, thinking that they were going to meet that without even expressing it. Um, Whatever. We'll come back to that piece because that's just important to talk about in relationships. At that. So it looked easy, taking care of everybody else. It doesn't look like a weakness. Every time I think that I hear the word people please, it doesn't give it the meaning of what it actually looks like in real life, if that makes any sense, of like how often we're constantly people pleasing. Because people pleasing can just be like, oh, you're like someone that likes to like kiss ass or whatever. You always like to be the one, the favorite one and everything, but that's not really always a true, or the pick me, right? Like a pick me girl or guy, because guys are also pick me's, not just the women, men. Um, but being like that pick me, right? Of like, let me just be the one to always just be acknowledged or seen. Sometimes we don't think that we're bringing that kind of energy or that we're doing these kind of behaviors, but sometimes that's what people pleasing is, right? But sometimes people pleasing can also look like I'm okay, I'm fine, I don't need help, I'll figure it out. Um, Taking care of everyone else's emotions while we're ignoring our own, right? Of like, I just need to make sure that my partner is safe and I just want to make sure that they love me and that they're happy. That makes me feel happy. But that's you ignoring yourself along the way, abandoning yourself because you're not even checking in with what do I want? Does this make me feel good? Does this relationship make me feel good? We're just constantly always trying to make other people feel comfortable and safe. So for the longest time, I was much better at answering what other people need of me instead of answering what I needed of myself, and that showed up in my mental health. Um, it was a really hard realization because time and time again, I will get into these, just things in life would happen that they were just kind of detrimental or felt that detrimental, right? Like worst case scenario is happening, abandonment or my abandonment wound would get triggered, and then I would just feel like I was losing people or places or things, and that was very hurtful because then I realized along the way how much I was not paying attention to myself and how much I was hurting myself along the way of not taking care of myself, of not thinking of like, what do I think about this? What do I want in this relationship? Is this relationship even healthy for me? Or is this job even healthy for me? I always just pushed through until I couldn't, until things got worse and worse and worse. Um, I remember realizing that I had to become so used to like seeking approval and reassurance that I wasn't trusting my own decisions. It was a hard realization, realizing how much I wasn't listening to my voice. I was listening to other people's voices along the way of how I should live. And again, we think that we're listening to ourselves sometimes, but sometimes we're like, that's not your voice. And and yeah. Um so then yeah, as I said earlier, as like what would I ask? I'll be like, well, what do you think? Or do you think this is the right choice? Or what would you do to this? And there was a difference between like just wanting feedback or guidance even, right? Of like consejitos, right, here and there, but sometimes we don't realize that like when we do too much of that, we're putting our power in somebody else of making those decisions for ourselves when we can make those decisions for ourselves. And it doesn't matter if it's a good decision or a bad decision or, whatever it may be. And I think that's where we get scared along the way is like, if we make this decision, I don't trust myself to make this decision because we don't know what that looks like. Or thinking that we're going to make a bad decision and it's going to be um, like worst case scenario, I guess, right? Of like, I remember always saying like, oh, I can't make like, I don't trust myself. I can't make that decision. I'm scared of making certain decisions because I was worried about what the outcome would be. And along the way, that's us asking for everyone else's permission along the way and losing the self trust within ourselves. So, what that means, right, is that sometimes it's important for us just to pause and remember that to check in with ourselves first is really the message that I have for today. I'm really kind of like stuck with a little bit of words and whatever, but again, right here. So we gotta learn how to. Oh my gosh, guys, my words just completely blanked out. So okay, we're gonna bring it back. And again, I'm not gonna edit this because I want all of this to be raw as much as possible, just to help get out those unexpected planning things like we're doing it here. Let's go back to my reflection. So, if you have ever been someone that's experienced or questioned, like, what does people pleasing even mean? What does that look like? I think that we all have done some form of people pleasing one way or the other because we're human beings and we want to get things that we want because who doesn't want that? But then that can be very catastrophic at some point. Maybe you're someone that knows exactly what everyone else needs. Maybe you're someone that's really good at sensing everyone's emotions in the room or anticipating problems that haven't even happened. Um, Again, like you're probably someone that lets normally likes to always check in with everybody of like how are you, what do you need, and all that stuff. And one good example of like where does that come from or where does that stem from, sometimes it comes from like cultural or like family, right? That's just one example. Again, this is always our we are always constantly influenced by so many different systems and conditionings of how we're supposed to be. So for example, being la niña buena or like being like calladita te ves más bonita, right? When we hear that growing up, we don't realize how much power that has as an adult, porque especially as like a Latina or Hispanic or whatever it may be, right? Chicana, I identify as Chicana. Um, we grew up with like always taking care of everybody. And especially as a woman of like making sure that everyone's taken care of, everyone's fed, everyone's like that nurturing piece, and then we are always the ones to eat last. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. Um, that's just one example, right? And again, like along the ways, these are just costumbres that we get used to, and it's okay. Like again, like that's a beautiful thing to have. But again, like when was the last time that you served yourself first instead of waiting for everyone else to eat? Or when was the last time that you took yourself on a solo date, even at that, right? Of like, let me go take myself, let me go treat myself because I did something good. I bet you that some of you are probably going to think about your loved ones first, aka your kids or your partner and everything, of like checking in what do they need first before we go check in with ourselves. um, those are like little things like that of examples. And again, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's just we've learned these by survival. We learn how to adapt. Um, and now it's okay to also give yourself an opportunity to learn something new. You can still have a big heart. You can still be a giving, loving person, nurturing person, but it doesn't mean that you have to always default to people pleasing um, just to be happy. You can learn to listen to yourself again. So, when I was in the darkest spots, darkest times of my lives, I've always learned just to connect with nature. I have, been creating. I mean, I think always we have a relationship with nature, but I can only speak for myself. But I think it's been about like, I want to say when I moved here to Washington, 11 years is when I started to like build a relationship with nature and spend time just sitting outside and going on walks and going on trail hikes. Washington is beautiful for that. So it was a really beautiful place for me to learn how to reconnect with Madre Tierra and have just, a relationship with her at that. And it always reminds me of just how big life is at that. I even get emotional when I think about it because I think all the times that I struggled with my mental health, with like anxiety, when I was in survival spaces. Ooh, I didn't know how to like just sit still. I didn't know how to like calm my anxiety down. I would get constant panic attacks. Um, and I didn't know what to do to like calm me in the moments. It was scary at times. Because I didn't know what the next hour, 2 hours would look like. And going outside and stepping out in nature, even just sitting outside with her, listening to the trees and the birds and like the water if I was near water, that helped me just really realize that there was more outside of myself, that I was okay with being, um, even just sitting still, and that I wasn't going to like the thoughts in my head or like the whatever my mind was always constantly racing and racing and racing, thinking worst case scenarios. It doesn't mean that everything is always going to happen the way that my mind would create it at that. And there's just something so beautiful about just sitting outside with Madre Tierra and like just visiting with her, because you who doesn't ever feel better? Like, when do you ever go to a park or to like the lake if you have access, or like camping and just disconnecting from life and electronics? Like, when do you not ever feel better? Or the mountains, right? Um, Nature doesn't ask me to prove anything. The trees don't ask me what I've accomplished. The mountains don't ask me if I'm productive enough. The ocean doesn't ask me if I figured everything out. Nature just really helped me learn how to be simply me and be still along the way, um, without no distractions, without no phone, without no rushing, without trying to solve everything. And there's been moments and times where, I can sit outside for hours and hours because sometimes my body needs to get regulated. And the more dysregulated that I am, the longer sometimes it takes for me to get regulated. And that's where I realized that, like, sometimes with sitting with nature, that was the best medicine in itself, because it just really does something to you. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with in terms of like having a relationship with nature, I would encourage you to just practice being outside without a distraction. Put your phones away. Put your phones away for at least 10, 15 minutes. Sit in the outside. Si está haciendo mucho calor, like right now, como it's like summertime, it's hot. I mean, not here in Washington, it's actually really nice. But, go find a tree, go find something, go sit somewhere in the shade for like 10 minutes and just people watch, just look at the trees, look at the birds, and start to like even check in with your body. Like, what are you noticing different with your body? What do you notice your mind will start to settle a little bit more along the way, versus thinking that we're like racing, 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 all of that, right? At first, the silence is really uncomfortable. Remember, I don't know if I used to really have a hard time with silence or just even sitting still. My therapist always, we talk about that often, of like when I have big sessions in therapy, I just want to get up. Like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to get up. And in the beginning, it was so hard for me to sit still and talk. Like, I always wanted to run away. So I'm a runner. I was a runner. I'm also a fighter. I'm also a freeze. I'm all of them. I'm a fight, flight, and freeze. All of the responses. So yeah, it gets uncomfortable when you're just trying to sit there in silence, perhaps, or just sit there with nature and the birds. Like your mind's gonna want you to get up and go do something, right? You shouldn't be doing this. You gotta get up and do that. As much as possible, try to ignore those parts of the voices because again, those voices are not always yours. Those voices are influenced from other people of like, we need to be getting up, you can't be lazy, you should be doing this is time that you're wasting. Those voices, right? The ones that are always constantly rushing you to do things. Um, Sometimes when life gets quiet, that's when everything wants to get loudest the most, like the thoughts, the emotions, the questions, the how we're going to figure this out. And that's how we can slowly just start to notice those small things and recognize that, again, we don't have to always solve it. It's just more of me of taking care of my body, taking care of my mind, my soul, and just having a pause. There's nothing wrong with having a pause. If anything, I think that we need to pause more versus being on go, go, go. So you begin to start to notice the small things when your mind starts to get louder. You can notice the sound of the wind. How does the sun feel in your body? And this, like the rate, like all of that stuff, the feeling of the sun, the movement of the trees, your own breath. And underneath all of that noise, you will slowly start to listen to that voice of yours that you haven't listened to perhaps, right, for a long time. You begin to notice yourself a little bit more. You begin to notice what it is that you're needing or what you're tending to. I wouldn't be surprised if you cry along the way, if you're just sitting there, because again, sometimes your body just needs that little break. It's like a little timeout for yourself. Give yourself timeouts, guys. We work too much. And when I say timeouts, don't be on social media in your timeouts. Give your brain a break. But when we start to learn how to just spend time with ourselves and be with ourselves, we start to kind of notice who we are outside of our titles, outside of our responsibility, outside of what everyone expects us to be. And then that's where like our authenticity starts to come back, starts to like begin because we're starting to recognize who we actually are outside of what we thought that we were. And it's a slow journey of just learning how to like find your voice again along the way, listening to your voice at that along the way. But I would encourage you to just learn what who you are outside all of these roles. Some of the reflection questions that I have for you today that I invite you to just reflect on is where in my life am I listening more to others than myself? So where am I listening to others more to myself? I don't know why that question sounds weird. What helps me feel connected to who I truly am? What would I choose if I trusted myself a little more? Ooh, that's a good one. That's been something that I've been working on of like self-trust and like allowing myself to choose for me and choose what I want to do, especially with like my work and my business and stuff. Um, and learning how to trust myself in that voice is has been really interesting. So I like that question. Again, what would I choose if I trusted myself a little bit more? What helps me feel connected to who I truly am? Where in my life am I listening more to others than myself? Reflect on those questions. I would encourage you to journal them out, to voice message them out. Maybe share this with a friend, share this with somebody where you can kind of have like an accountability of just having these kind of questions, right? And I would love for you to share your thoughts and tell me what you think, your questions, your reflections. I think that I'm going to try to do something a little bit different is that if you find yourself with questions, go ahead and shoot them on here, comment them, send me a message, and I'm going to, I think, start answering them on Instagram Live. Or not Instagram Live, because not Instagram Live, but just on Instagram of like just answering questions that come along the way. And and yeah, let's see where that goes. Let's be more engaging with this and tell me what questions or thoughts that you may have with this. Any feedback is always helpful. The flor that I have for you guys today is your inner voice has never disappeared. It's always been there. It's waiting for you to slow down. It's waiting for you to trust yourself. It's waiting for you to just come home and listen. And it's not asking you to be someone new. I think that's where we get stuck, is that we think that we have to become someone new when or hear or redefine our voice at that. But it's like, no, like your true authentic self has always been within you. It's just a matter of allowing ourselves to be that person and find her and or him, find them, get to know them again outside of what the world tells you to be. So that's episode number 3. I hope that you enjoy it. Tell me what some of your takeaways are, some questions, some reflections. I want to hear it all. Thank you for spending time with me. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that your story matters. Have a great week.